Hi, my name is Amy Fulmer, and I am a functional nutrition coach, a Blue Diamond leader with doTERRA, and I am so excited to be teaching this class about fasting, the missing link. And just, I'm so grateful for just this journey of getting to serve people and help people and just make such an impact through helping people feel their best and have the health and wellness and vibrance and just vitality really that allows them to be their best selves and fulfill the mission and purpose that they have and live out in love and joy. So, um, let me start the slideshow, and I'm really excited you're here with us. I called this class the missing link because I really feel like this fasting is a tool that is highly overlooked. And a lot of people just have really not realized how much it can dramatically change your wellness journey, your healing journey. And so it's so simple. It saves you so much money. It saves you so much time. And it's just a tool that I absolutely love. So let me share a little bit of my story. So I started on this journey of, learning about fasting about 7 years ago. And at that point, I started to just gradually gain some weight. I, was starting to get closer to my 40s, and we vacationed a lot. I was eating out. And so I started reading and learning about intermittent fasting. And so I started to implement some of those things. I was skipping breakfast, and usually I didn't start to eat until 11, 12, 1 o'clock a lot of days. And I would try to close my window earlier in the evening. And despite doing that, I continue to gain weight just gradually, right? A couple pounds a year. And you can see here this picture was kind of a wake up call to me where I saw that and I realized like my body is telling me something, right? My body is letting me know that I am not getting it and supporting it in the way that it needs. And I was starting what I think to become insulin resistant. I especially was starting, as you can see there, maybe in the picture, gain a lot of fat around my abdomen. And if you can look down and see your stomach, right? If you're standing up and if your stomach's sticking out a little bit, you're probably insulin resistant. And we'll talk about that. But that's what was happening for me. And I was doing all the right things, right? I was eating really healthy. Like I said, when we would travel, but even when we would eat out, I would eat my food in a good order. I would eat lots of vegetables. I was doing a lot of walking. I was going to the gym 3 times a week. I was eating mostly whole food for these several years, and yet I still continued to gain a little bit of weight, especially when I was on vacation, and it just wasn't coming off. Even though I was eating so healthy, even though I was doing weightlifting, even though I was walking, even though I was doing all the right things. I don't know if any of you can relate to that. Um, but it was obviously very frustrating. And so at that point, I just decided I have got to figure this out. I need to pay attention to my body. This is something that I can't just let continue to get worse because I know the effects of when insulin resistance continues to grow and our body stores extra fat around all those crucial vital organs. That's where it's the most dangerous. And I just was determined to figure it out. And so I started diving deep. I started really researching. I started reading a ton of books on fasting and watching lots of podcasts or listening to podcasts, watching, following different doctors, and just really learned a lot. And I learned about how hormones matter. And I changed the approach that I was taking. I stopped skipping breakfast. I stopped doing intermittent fasting the way that I thought that it was supposed to be to help my body. And sustainably, since it's been coming up on a year now, I lost 13 pounds and have been able to keep it off. And I feel great. And it's been so encouraging to finally do something that is working. I'm going to teach you why. What are the things that I did differently? What has made the difference, and how can it be something that's sustainable? And you can just see, So it wasn't my lack of discipline, right? I was disciplined. I was doing what I thought were all the right things. It's just that my strategy was incomplete, and I was missing some things that my body needed to heal that I wasn't healing through what I was doing. So willpower was not the problem. And I want to really speak to this because if you have health issues, especially if you are insulin resistant, if you have extra fat storage on your body, if you're struggling with high cholesterol or blood pressure or any of these things, typically you're probably doing what your doctor was telling you, right? And it's still you're needing medication or it's not getting better. And it's not because our willpower is not good enough, right? It's because we're getting wrong information. We're being told to eat less, move more, be more disciplined, count calories, right? And what's actually happening when we do that is it's disrupting our hormones when we're calorie restricting, right? Insulin resistance is the problem that doing those things doesn't actually solve. Okay. And a lot of times doing that approach actually creates more stress and more cortisol in our bodies. And, when we're told to eat less and count the calories, we might be eating a lot of health foods that are actually ultra processed foods that are making the problem worse. And then the microbiome is completely off balance. And then that affects our metabolism. And it's just this whole cascade of events that does not support our bodies in ever healing, right? 74% of Americans are overweight or obese. Okay. So if you have a class where 74% of the kids are not passing the tests, right? It's not the kid's fault. It's the teacher's fault. And so I think this is a really important thing to address, that the majority of Americans have been given wrong information. And I hope this class really clarifies a lot of those principles and you leave feeling so clear and so excited to finally have the tools to know what to do. Statistically, you guys, 90% of people who lose weight will regain it. And oftentimes people actually gain more than they initially lost. So it's not about a personal failure. It's not about that you have not been disciplined enough. It's that you have not had the right information and the right tools to help your body heal. I want to briefly mention one study about this because it is just crazy. It was a very large study, thousands of women in it. It was a very long study. And what they did was they restricted the calories just from about 2,000 by 250 calories. And this group of women, and then they were having them exercise at least 4 days a week for, an hour a lot of times. So they were doing a lot of extra movement. They were moving more. They were eating less by 250 calories. So what happened was in this group, in the study, they all lost weight. That first 6 months, people started to see progress and they started to lose weight. But guess what happened is they kept following them. After about a year, and after that 6-month mark, they started to see that they were gaining back the weight. And so guess what they did in the study? They reduced their calories even more. And they got it so low, they kept having to reduce the calories because guess what happened? The women actually kept gaining back the weight. And what would happen is they would reduce the calories, they'd lose a little bit. And then over time, as they kept up with their workouts and they kept up with their calorie diet, they would gain back the weight. And so over the course of several years, they just kept restricting the calories more and more and more. They got down to close to 1,200 calories, you guys, like starving. And they still were gaining the weight back. And I'm going to explain why. But guess what they did in the study? They started putting these women on weight loss drugs to be able to salvage the study and try and show that something was working. They ended up actually stopping the study. It was supposed to be quite a bit longer study than it was. And after, I can't remember how many years, it was like 4 or 5 years, maybe a little bit longer, they stopped the study for futility reasons, meaning they realized this is not helping. We're making things worse, and they stopped it. So that's just, again, a great example of what I'm talking about, right? So this is why it didn't work, okay? When we eat less and we move more and our body goes into a calorie-restricted state, right? It actually decreases our metabolism. So at first, your metabolism can't adjust fast enough. And so that's why the body pulls that extra storage and uses up the fat. But as the metabolism adjusts to getting in less calories, your metabolism goes down. And then the body starts to gain back that fat. It starts to disrupt your hormones, this process. So it increases your hunger hormones when you restrict calories. And it decreases your satiety hormones when you restrict calories. And if you lose weight this way, a lot of you might know someone who has lost a lot of weight. You actually have all this excess saggy skin that happens, right? And people need surgery. And over time, inevitably, at least in 90% of people, the weight returns that was eliminated, and oftentimes more. And so that's actually what's happening in that eat less, move more advice. So what is different is when we go long enough without eating, something actually metabolically switches in our bodies, and our body goes into a fasting response. So instead of having this calorie restricted response that we have, our body starts to go into a fasted response. Now, when that happens, that can be anywhere from 17 after like 16 hours. Most people, if you are insulin resistant, you don't start to have a fasting response until about 24 hours. So between 14 and 24 hours, depending on how metabolically healthy you are, your body will move and switch metabolically into this fasted state. And in this state, it actually improves your metabolism. Your metabolism goes up, it increases. Your hunger hormone, your ghrelin, goes down, so you feel less hungry. Your satiety hormone, leptin, that increases, so your hormones improve, they balance more. The autophagy that starts to happen when we have this fasted response, it actually uses up the extra skin as the body uses up the fat. And so people who lose weight this way don't have to go and have surgery. The body naturally uses up that extra skin. And so wonderfully, because you haven't destroyed your metabolism, you're healthy. As you're eating healthy and living a healthy lifestyle, that weight does not return. And I will tell you, the research shows it takes about 1 year of the body being at a new weight for it to become the new set weight. So it is something, even if you do lose weight through fasting, and again, we'll talk a little bit about the benefits of fasting are not just weight loss. There's so many benefits way beyond weight loss. So please don't, if you are someone who doesn't need to lose weight, please keep watching because there's so many other things we're going to talk about. But just so you know, though, it does take about a year for the body to have that new set weight. And I was just reading some research, even just wearing a weighted vest of 10% of your previous body weight can, just during the day or at least half the day over a course of a few months can actually help the body it'll help it in keeping off and reestablishing that new set weight. So the fasting is not about eating less necessarily. It is about changing the signals and the hormones in your body. So let's talk a little about hormones and hunger, because I want you to understand this, because the more knowledge is power, right? The more you really understand your body and how to support it, the easier you can make that choice to do it. So the hormones behind your weight management, behind hunger, behind cravings, insulin is one of the most crucial hormones in this whole process. And basically, if you have insulin in your bloodstream, your body is not going to use fat. It won't use up your fat storage. So we really need to be aware of how we can help remove insulin from the bloodstream and reduce that in the body so that we can access and tap into fat stores. So high insulin makes your fat loss really, really difficult. It controls your blood it doesn't control your blood sugar, but I'll talk about that, how it plays with your blood sugar, how it's related with that. Cortisol is your stress response, your stress hormone. And when cortisol is high, insulin is also high. And so we're going to talk about this later, and we'll also talk about this in our part 2 of this class. But if you are chronically stressed and you have high cortisol, even if you're doing all the right things, it is very, very hard to improve the metabolism and to shift into your body being able to use stored fat. And so this is a really important piece to understand and to address while we're trying to help the body heal. And it's actually very hard for the gut to heal as well. It's nearly impossible when cortisol is high. So this is a very important hormone to be aware of. Now, leptin is your satiety hormone. That means it signals to your body that you're full and to stop eating, right? And then the ghrelin is your hormone that says, eat more, I'm so hungry, right? And again, we just heard about how those are affected when we do calorie restriction versus fasting. So I want to explain a little bit more about insulin, because this is a very important principle to understand in knowing how to help support the body in healing. So normally, there's blood sugar in our bodies. And I will say another piece of this whole story about blood sugar is your liver. And because your liver plays an important part of also helping remove sugar from your bloodstream. And if your liver is all clogged up, and a lot of times people that are insulin resistant and are dealing with obesity, the liver is clogged up, and that is a key part as well of helping shift this whole process of the insulin resistance, which I'm going to teach you about. So just a side note, for another class, talk to your advocate about what can I do to help support my liver. We have an amazing liver cleanse that is a great starting point if you have struggled with obesity and insulin resistance. So but a healthy person, right, we have sugar in our bloodstream. It needs to get inside our cells to give it energy, right? And insulin is what comes along, and basically it's like a key that unlocks the door of the cell and allows the blood sugar to go into the cell. And then the cell can use it for energy, right? And so, but this process is not what's happening when someone is insulin resistant. And when someone's insulin resistant, they do not enter that true fasted state nearly as quickly. It takes them at least 24 hours typically. So somebody who's insulin resistant, what happens is the blood sugar comes along and the insulin comes along, but it's like the door of your cell does not have it's like that keyhole just got all messed up and like worn out, and the key no longer fits inside the keyhole, and it can't unlock the door anymore. And so what the body does is it says, okay, well, we've got to get the sugar into the cell. So we're going to make more insulin, and we're going to send more insulin to that cell to try to open the door basically and let the blood sugar in. And so the body produces more and more insulin, and then that actually causes more damage. So if you start taking insulin, if you're a type 2 diabetic, it's like giving an alcoholic alcohol. It's the very problem in the first place. There's too much insulin. What we need to do is lower the blood sugar and allow the cells to heal. And we're going to talk about some things that can actually do that. So this is one of the reasons why fasting fails for people. If you are insulin resistant, and I think I was starting to become insulin resistant, that's where most of the fat in my body was getting stored. I love dessert. And I just think that is what was happening. And by the way, if you've had your blood work done and your A1C is normal, your blood sugars are normal, you may still be very insulin resistant. You have to get your insulin levels tested, not your blood sugar levels. So, but this is why fasting fails, because when your body is insulin resistant, it does not enter a fasted state nearly as easily and nearly as quickly. And so if you're doing like I was doing, where I was skipping breakfast and I was having maybe 16 hours of fasting or sometimes even longer, my body was never going into a fasted state. So I was just doing calorie restriction. And that's why things kind of got a little bit worse over time. And this is why customizing to each person in your individual body when you start fasting is very, very important. This is why easing into fasting matters, because when you are insulin resistant, your body does not switch metabolically from sugar burning to fat burning very easily. And in fact, a lot of times when your body is stuck in sugar burning and you start trying to fast, your body will start to pull sugar. It'll break down muscle. It'll break down things in your body that should not be broken down because it doesn't want to switch out of the sugar burning state when you're insulin resistant. And so this is why it's so important to, when you're insulin resistant, to approach fasting differently. And the last reason is, when you are insulin resistant, what you eat matters way more than somebody who has a healthy, if they're insulin sensitive, right? If they're not pre-diabetic or insulin resistant. And so protein and carbohydrates are going to have a very different effect on someone who's insulin resistant than someone who's not. And so it's just a whole different ballgame when this is part of what's going on in your body. One thing I do want to mention here, as we're going into talking about fasting, it's just starting to be aware of hunger. Now, again, you're already set up for failure if you're insulin resistant. Like about 70% of Americans over 50% are pre-diabetic or diabetic. Okay, that's 1 in 2 people. And we're 70, in fact, it's close to 90% are not metabolically healthy. They don't have ideal insulin and metabolic health markers. Okay, so this is almost all of us. So being aware of, there is physical hunger, right, where our hormones are telling us eat or stop eating. Then there's also emotional eating and food addictions. And then there's conditioned hunger, where it's like, we're going to the movies. Of course, we're going to eat popcorn, right? We're just conditioned to do that. So the goal is not to ignore your hunger, but if you can understand what's happening, it's just another tool and way that you can make changes and help the body heal. So Dr. Jason Fung has a great book on this called The Hunger Code. If you struggle with food addiction or you struggle with emotional eating, conditioned hunger, and just social eating, all those kinds of things, it's a great resource to look at. So let's talk about fasting the right way, the customized way to you, to your individual body, your way of being able to heal, right? So what actually is fasting? It is not starving. And in fact, it's completely different than starving. Starving can happen if you go maybe weeks without eating, but it's not going to happen in the time frame that we're going to be doing fasting. It is also not on your eating days being able to eat whenever within a certain window, or say you're fasting part of the day and then half the day just means you can eat all that half the day. That is not, we want to do time restricted eating, not intermittent fasting. So time restricted eating is 2 to 3 intentional meals on your eating days. And I prefer when it's 3, but 2 would be breakfast and lunch. And we'll talk about that. And then real fasting that is healing and that is helpful includes your healing days, which is when you're fasting, and then those rebuilding, those refueling days. That's what's happening. That's what's happening when you're eating. And then on the fasting days, that's your healing day. And we're going to talk about all the healing that happens. So your body responds differently when it has time between your meals. And this is really important for you to understand. Remember, we talked about the whole problem with insulin, right? We talked about how having too much insulin in the body is what causes all these other problems, the resistance, those other things. Even if you're eating protein, even if you're eating low carb, your body still has to produce insulin. The only thing you can eat and your body won't have to produce insulin is fat, just pure fat, right? So anything else, even though you think, oh, I'm being healthy, I'm eating olives, I'm eating nuts, as you're snacking throughout, an afternoon or whatever, your body is still having to produce insulin. And that is why it's so important to include in your fasting time restricted eating, so your body and your cells can have a break from constantly having that insulin, trying to unlock the cell, basically. So that's a really important thing to remember, that this is why eating late at night also is really, really hard for people that are insulin resistant. Because when you eat maybe after 7 p.m., 8 p.m., what happens is your insulin is still high when you go to sleep. And then that whole night you have raised insulin. Versus if you stop eating at 5 or 6, maybe 7, the latest, that gives it time for insulin to go down. And then while you're sleeping, your insulin is lower, and it's going to be much more of a healing time for your body. So remember, this applies to your eating times as well. So different days for different purposes. So on your healing days, that's what I like to call your fasting days, or your healing days. That's when you're going to be fasting. That's when we're going to see all sorts of repair in the body happening. Autophagy. I'm going to explain when that is. It was discovered a little over a decade ago. The man who discovered it actually received the Nobel Prize. And it's so exciting. It's basically your body's amazing recycling system. And in healthy individuals, it can start as early as 13 to 15 hours of not eating. You can start to have some autophagy. In people that are insulin resistant, obviously, the more insulin resistant you are, like if you have full-on type 2 diabetes versus pre-diabetic versus not pre-diabetic yet, obviously it's going to be longer and longer the more insulin resistant you are, that it takes for your body to experience autophagy. And it's just where your body will have this basically system where it goes around and recycles damaged cells, extra skin, just things your body doesn't need anymore. It goes around and breaks those things down and recycles it and uses it for energy for things that it does need. And it's a really important thing to happen in your body in prevention of disease, cancer specifically, precancerous cells, zombie cells, right? Cells that have been damaged DNA, all those cells. The autophagy will actually break all that down. And that's an incredible, incredible healing process. And so if you're insulin resistant, it might be 22 to 24 hours before autophagy even starts. And again, this is why so many people who try fasting, And if it doesn't work, this is probably the reason why, right? Because you're not going long enough before these healing fasting mechanisms and responses start to happen. And then on those fasting days, the insulin is going to reset, right? It's going to give it a time for that to be cleared from the bloodstream. The cells are going to get time to heal, and we're going to see some improvements in those cells being more sensitive to the insulin rather than resistant to it. Now, on your fueling rebuilding days, that is when it's really important that you are intentionally nourishing your body enough. You need to be prioritizing protein. That's 25 plus grams per meal, non-negotiable. And whether it's plant-based protein, it's a lot harder that way, but just being very intentional with clean protein, getting enough nutrients. So we're going to avoid ultra-processed food because we want to eat real food that's going to nourish us, not stuff that's empty calories. And those are the days where our body's going to rebuild. So we're going to work our muscles those days, and we're going to support our hormones with good things. Oops, sorry. Sorry about that. My phone just turned on. Okay. So, and then where your wellness is built through rhythm and balance, right? And this variation of having these healing days and then your fueling days is going to help support the body in healing. And I want to just share a little bit more about the benefits of fasting because it's so exciting. And we'll dive a little bit deeper, but just to be really brief, there's so many benefits for your brain. The mental clarity that can come as your body shifts to using ketones as fuel. You're going to notice a lot more mental clarity, less brain fog. It's going to improve your hormones. It's going to improve your gut health. It's going to improve your metabolism. It increases longevity. It lowers cholesterol, blood pressure, reduces inflammation. Like if you have any kind of a health issue, fasting is an incredible tool. And what I love about it is you save so much money. And especially if you have a spouse that wants to get on board and do this with you as well, it really can open up resources to support your body with other healing tools that even if you don't have the funds, fasting can make it affordable, right? So your body is really deeply connected. And as we start to fast, it affects so many parts of the body. Now, one thing I want to say here, you're probably like, so excited. Okay, when do I start, right? It's really, really important to ease into fasting. If your cortisol is high, if you're very stressed, your body's going to have a hard time switching to burning fat and using ketones from the sugar burning because that's the cycle it likes to stay in because insulin's high, cortisol's high, right? That's where we have to stay in that place. And so it's really important to realize that you need to take this really slowly, this process. And so, start where you are. Give it time. Gradually, we're going to talk about some specific things that you can do. And as you get more comfortable, as your body learns how to metabolically switch, meaning going from sugar burning to going to fat burning, your metabolism is going to improve. And that's when you're going to make some sustainable, lasting changes. So just kind of think of it as learning to swim, right? You would never just go and jump in. Like you need to start in the kiddie pool and start in the shallow end and learn some basics. And then you can go in deeper and deeper and be confident and have fun and enjoy swimming, right? Or skiing or anything like that, right? You just take it, realize that this is going to be a process that you need to take your body through. This is going to be a journey where you're going to keep learning. And please do not ever jump into a really long fast. Please follow what we're going to talk about in this class and do it in a gradual way so your body and your metabolism can learn. All right, so why fasting probably didn't work for you? Maybe you had misinformation. No adaptation, meaning maybe if you were doing the same thing over and over, the body needs the variation. Your hormones may not have been improving because you weren't fasting long enough, and so you were never getting into a fasted state. OMAD is called 1 meal a day, and this is it's a common thing that I've seen people fall into this trap where, again, if you're eating 1 meal a day, you're never fasting longer than you might be going 20 hours or 22 hours or however long. If you're insulin resistant, you're still not entering a fasted state. And so you're just having calorie restriction and it's destroying your metabolism. It's destroying your body. And so that trap is really, really dangerous. Or if you're even doing 2 meals a day, you still might have been falling into calorie restriction and never getting into this healing fasting response. So let's talk about this variation. And I want to really emphasize some things here, okay? So you might try, and we're going to talk about some things to do first, but just so you kind of have a vision, you might do a 24-hour fast, right? And then you're going to have a day or two of refueling, right? And eating and being very intentional and eating and fueling your body with plenty of good, nourishing food. Now, you don't want to overeat. We'll talk about that, but and then you might go into a 48-hour fast and, give yourself 2 days, and then you're going to refuel. 3 or 4 days later, you might want to try a 3 day, and then you're going to refuel. And then you might do another 36-hour, and we're going to refuel. And just this kind of shifting it up is going to help. And then having days where, we're doing longer than a 24-hour fast, so the body can start to go into this healing fasting response. And then alternating that with a day of refeeding is what really starts to create this metabolic flexibility. They just had a really large meta-analysis study that came out, and they found that this alternate day fasting, meaning you're fasting at least 24 plus hours, right? You're not eating for an entire day, so really 36 hours, and then you eat the next day. That's what creates the most metabolic flexibility and actually resetting and healing the metabolism. So more effective than anything else, and it far outperformed calorie restriction. Having these longer than 24-hour fasts and then having these refueling days is what allowed the body to start to learn to metabolically switch. So what can you have while you're fasting? Supplements are really, really important. We're going to talk about that. Electrolytes are essential. Do not try fasting unless you're doing just 24 hours or less. But otherwise, you really need to have electrolytes. And right when you wake up is the best time to have those electrolytes. It's going to help your cortisol stabilize and just help kind of get you really going for the day. You can have herbal tea. No sugar, no sweeteners in it or anything like that. Plain coffee. Now, coffee, if you are a coffee drinker and you drink that first thing in the morning, your cortisol is going to be higher, your blood sugar, your insulin, all of that. So if you do have coffee, you want to wait until at least 2 hours after you wake up. Cortisol comes down, and then you're going to have a better response to that. You don't want to add any sweeteners, creamers. MCT oil can be added. And then bone broth is a great tool to use while you're fasting, but you don't want to do more than a cup of it because it can take you out of the fasted state. It can be too much protein, but it can make you feel really great if you're doing a little bit of a longer fast and you're not feeling awesome. Drinks a cup of bone broth and those amino acids, it's just going to kind of re-energize you and you're going to be feeling good. Can you have fat? Now that depends. When you're first learning to fast, I highly recommend using fat, and we're going to actually talk about partial fasting, and we'll do more about that in our next class. Please don't miss that. But you can have grass-fed butter. MCT oil, especially in women, has been found, especially if you take that at night before bed, it can help increase your fat burning. Cold-pressed coconut oil, extra virgin olive oil. These are all ones you can have, and I only recommend using them at first. Once your body has learned to metabolically switch, it's going to burn and use more fat in your own body rather than you giving it fat to use for fuel, for energy, right? But when you're learning how to fast and you're training your metabolism and you're shifting it, having some fat while you're fasting can actually really help your body switch. And we'll talk about, again, the partial fasting and some really easy ways to do it that are just no-brainer, super simple. So, all right, this is so exciting. This is one of my favorite parts. So what actually happens when you're fasting, right? And this is really, really helpful to understand. And you can see here I have 5 days. I would only recommend doing this long of a fast maybe once a year. Now we're going to talk about partial fasting, and that you can do it as a 5-day. There's some great research. If you are trying to heal your body, you could do a partial 5-day fast once a month. And it's super healing, super powerful. It's actually going to cause a lot more healing than if you're not doing it that often. So just depending on where you are in your health journey is going to depend on how much you're utilizing different tools, right? So wait for the information on partial fasting, but let me talk about when you're doing your fast, and even in partial fasting, actually, we see a lot of these same things happening. And then if you're doing just more like water fasting with supplements, electrolytes, all those things, we're seeing all these things happen. So in the first day, not a lot happens, actually, right? Your glycogen store in your liver gets used up, and that's usually between 1 and 3 pounds of body weight. So your body's not losing any fat. You might notice some really fast weight loss. It's not because you've lost any fat. It's just your glycogen store got used up. Okay. You're going to lose water. Water retention in the body's going to go down. Insulin is going to go down and you're going to feel super hungry. The first day, you guys, is the hardest. You're going to be so like, oh, I want to eat that. And you're going to have hunger pains and all of that. I'm going to talk about some solutions for that. Now, after 24 hours, so day two might actually be during the night. Say you're going to do alternate day fasting, meaning you're going to eat all day one day with 3 meals, right? The next day, you're not going to eat at all. And then you're going to eat the next day breakfast. That is actually 36 hours of fasting, right? So after 24 hours, we're now in day 2. So you might only, be having 1 day of not eating, but you're actually getting like 12 hours of day 2 fasting benefits, right? From 24 to 36 hours. And this is when it's so exciting, you guys, okay? You're going to have less hunger. And I promise you, if you're doing like a 48-hour fast, it's so much easier. You really don't typically feel hungry that second day, especially if you're taking your electrolytes, your omegas. We're going to talk about the supplements that are really important to take while you're fasting, your vitamin D. But you're not going to feel hungry typically. You're going to have ketones start to be produced, which is mean your brain's going to feel really energized. You're going to start to use up and pull from body fat for fuel. This is what we want, right? We want to have those ketones being produced. So our body's going to use our fat for storage instead of blood sugar. Autophagy starts to really kick into gear here after 24 hours for pretty much everyone. And that's what we want, right? We don't one of the leading cancer researchers in the world has said that if everybody would do a 5-day fast once a year, cancer rates would go down by 95%. Because when we have this autophagy happening, that's when we start to lose those precancerous cells. They get broken down. Those damaged cells, those zombie cells get broken down and they're no longer in our bodies. Your growth hormone, you guys, this is one of my most favorite parts. After 24 hours into 36 hours, that second day, we start to see it improve by 1,300%. Okay, this is massive increase in growth hormone. And why do we matter? Why does that matter? You guys, growth hormone preserves your muscle. It protects your muscle. So this is how we avoid losing muscle when we do fasting. It speeds up fat burning. It slows aging. We love having more growth hormone in our bodies. Your resting metabolic rate, which is the number of calories your body needs just to like breathe and survive, right? That goes up. Your metabolism increases, okay? This all starts happening after that 24-hour mark, which is why doing a 36-hour fast can be so healing and life-changing for our bodies. Now, on the third day, okay, this is when your brain-derived neurotrophic growth factor increases up to 400%. And what that does, it's basically like miracle grow. It's called miracle grow for the brain. It is the primary driver for neuroplasticity, meaning your brain being able to learn, your brain having strong memory, all of those things. The BDNF impacts and drives. And so when we have that increased, like it's powerful, right? Those hormone receptors for your insulin and for estrogen, those actually become more sensitive and improve your microbes in your gut. If you have overgrowths of fungal overgrowths and small intestinal, bacterial overgrowths, those start to be eliminated on day 3. Okay. So a lot of amazing things happening. And then on day 4, we start to have your protective genes, your longevity genes activated. That's huge. Your immune system and your gut lining is completely renewed on that 4th day. And we start to even see, this is so amazing to me, stem cells being created. Okay. This is like unbelievable to me. You've heard of maybe people spending thousands of dollars going down to Mexico, getting stem cell injections. When we're born, we have stem cells, right? But we don't ever get any more stem cells, except for if you do a 4-day fast. And even with partial fasts, we can see this start to happen, where your body is going to start to have new stem cells being created. I will tell you, I did a 5-day fast, and it was mostly, water, supplements, electrolytes, bone broth. And I was so shocked. On day 4, I started having some pain in my arm. And I was like, what is happening? This doesn't seem right. I shouldn't be having pain. I looked it up. That is normal when stem cells are being created. I had broken my arm when I was 14 and I still have scar tissue and it never heal totally normally. And so my body was repairing there and creating new stem cells. Like, it's so incredible. And then on day 5, we just have continuation of incredible levels, autophagy, ketosis, stem cell production. And actually, when you start to eat, we even have more stem cell production. So it's really incredible what that starts. I will say here, again, I would only do a like true kind of a fast of a 5-day once a year. This is not something you're going to do all the time. But these 2 days or 36 hours are going to be super impactful. Can you see why with all those things happening? And then I love doing 3-day fasts. I think they're the easiest kind of fast because you don't feel hungry those second and third days. So I love doing those ones. You might do that once a month. Or you could even do it, a few weeks out of the month if you wanted, if you find it to be easy. But your resting metabolic rate and your growth hormone kind of peaks after that, at the end of that 3rd day. So I don't really like to go longer than the 3 days. Again, unless you're doing partial fasting, which we'll talk about, you can totally do those 5-day partial fasts once a month with amazing healing that continues to improve. But if you are, doing not partial fasting, most of the time you're going to want to either do a 24 to 36 hour or maxing at 48 to 72 hours. So again, it's not one moment thing. It's a progression of healing that happens in the body, but it's powerful, right? Seeing how much those insulin levels can improve, the cells can heal, the receptors are starting to heal. It's incredible. All right. So there's 3 types of fasts. You've got a water fast, which is what I've kind of been talking about. Water fast also includes the supplements, electrolytes, bone broth, all of that. Dry fasting actually can be really helpful to do once, maybe twice a month max. It's where you don't even have water. I wouldn't recommend doing more than 24 hours, but 24 hours is amazing. And they actually have found in research that you have a lot more autophagy that happens if you do a dry fast. So you could totally use that tool if you wanted, once or twice a month. And then the partial fast, again, we'll talk a little bit about this in this class. And then the next class, the follow-up to this class, will go a lot deeper into partial fasting because you're going to want to know that, because I recommend most people start there. And that's where you're going to eat certain things. And let me show you what that is. So the first day that you do it, you can have 750 calories. And this is what it looks like: 46 grams of healthy fats, no seed oils, 63 grams of whole food carbs. So no processed foods, no flours, anything like that, just whole foods, vegetables, fruit, nuts, seeds, whole things. And then 18 grams of ideally plant-based protein. You could do a little bit of egg if you wanted. No sugar. So I wanted to tell you, pro tip here, use ChatGPT for the meal plans for this. If you're like, okay, I'm going to start with, I'm going to tell you a step-by-step at the end of this class, but one of those beginning steps is doing partial fasting. And so just put it into ChatGPT. Hey, give me a meal plan for 750 calories with these macros, right? 46 grams of healthy fats. Just tell it these things, right? And say, do it for 2 meals, or you could do 3 meals on your first day if you wanted, or you could do 2. And one thing that I didn't mention is you want to make sure that you are doing ideally breakfast if you are insulin resistant. The research shows that people that are insulin resistant, if they eat earlier in the day, they have a much better insulin response to everything else that they eat for the rest of the day, versus if they don't start eating until lunch or lunch and dinner time. And so I wouldn't recommend, because of that high cortisol, eating right when you wake up. Just have electrolytes right when you wake up. But 1 to 2 hours after you wake up, that's when I would recommend having a good 25 gram plus protein breakfast, all whole food. And so if you're doing the partial fasting, definitely have that first meal 1 to 2 hours after you wake up. Okay. And guess what? ChatGPT is going to give you an amazing meal plan and tell it, like, I want it to be just things that I don't have to cook, things that I can just pull together that are already ready, or whatever you need for you within your budget, with it, what foods you like, right? It can give you some great meal plans. I'm going to give you some in this class, but just a little pro tip there. So you're going to be having your electrolytes. You're going to totally be having your supplements. It's really important. We'll talk about that. You're going to be having creatine and glycerol as well. If you can, glycerol is optional, but it does help maintain more muscle mass. But the creatine, on these partial fasting days is really helpful, again, for muscle. And then the days 2 to 5, and just the research shows doing the 5 days of this is just going to give your body the most benefit. And I've been surprised. I've done this many times. I found it to be very easy. And you really, because you're having so much fiber and so much good fat, you really don't feel hungry. It was a great experience for me. So, and again, those are the macros. You can just plug that into ChatGPT and get some meal plans. You can take this QR code, scan that, and there's some really great resources. If you want to learn more about partial fasting, Dr. Walter Longo, he's been one of the main researchers from University of Southern California, I think, that has pioneered this whole concept. And he's got a great short little pamphlet that tells you all the details. There's a great resource from a functional clinic in California that gives you lots of recipes and meal plans. And he has a great basically not a podcast, but a seminar that he taught at a doctor's conference that's on here as well. It's really good. If you're a nerd like me and you like to see the research, you can see the research, and it's really, really exciting. If you know anyone who is insulin resistant, type 2 diabetic especially, or pre-diabetic, please have them watch this and do this, because it's so exciting, the improvements that they are seeing that are just absolutely massive for people with those health issues. So, okay. So all the fasting benefits without the hunger, right? Okay, and in the next class is when we're doing the meal plans. Sorry, I will not be showing you them in this class for the sake of time. So I do just briefly want to mention, for men, they can really fast anytime and their bodies do great. But for women, you can see here these different phases of menstruation. And Dr. Mindy Pell, she in her book, Fast Like a Girl, talks about and recommends not fasting or not doing longer fasts during days 11 to 15. I've done a lot of research. I've followed a lot of other health practitioners that have worked with thousands of people, and I don't think that's as important. So the main one is days 20 until you start your period. In those 27, 28, or not, days 20 through 27 or 28, those 7 or 8 days, you may not want to do longer fasts. You may just want to kind of have that be like a refueling time, and then fast the other, once your period starts. And for those 3 weeks, you can do any length of fast, and your hormones are going to respond great, and it's going to be really healing to your hormones. So, but this is a great thing to take a screenshot of. And just while you're fasting, it is so important. So we're going to talk about how to support your body now. And one of the most important things is stress. And I will say, if you are ultra stressed, if you are in deep grief, if when you stand up, you're super dizzy, right? Do not fast. If your cortisol is that high, your body is probably not going to metabolically switch. You're probably not going to go into a fasted state, and you might start breaking down muscle, which we don't want that to happen. And so making sure that you are getting some support, and I'll share some ideas for that, for stress and just being in a more calm, peaceful place. Hydrating is non-negotiable. It's so important. Those minerals we're going to talk about, making sure you're getting enough sleep. If you're not sleeping well, or you're really skimping on sleep when you're fasting, you also may not go into a fasted state, because your body, again, cortisol is going to be high. Your body is going to be in fight or flight. So when you're being intentional and nurturing your body, it's going to respond best, and you're going to have a great experience fasting. So let's talk about some products to support your fast. I have tried, I've been on this journey for many, many years, and I've done fasting without supplementation. And when you do it with it, it is a game changer. I have had a completely different experience. It's been so much easier. I feel so much better. And I would recommend that everyone utilizes supplements while they fast, just because just almost everybody, 94% of Americans have nutrient deficiencies, right? So I actually taught a class recently with an integrative doctor, and I was so grateful for what she shared. She spoke before I spoke, and she had just said, I would never buy supplements from Costco or anywhere at the grocery store. I would never trust that. And I would say, adding to that, okay, if it's something that has third-party testing, clinical research, that's the main thing to look for. But most things at Costco don't have that, right? She's like, I would never trust any of those. She said, I would recommend, everybody needs a multivitamin, everyone needs omegas, and everyone needs probiotic. Hands down, everyone. And I was like, yes, I was loving hearing what she was saying. And somebody raised their hand and said, what brands would you recommend? And she said, well, I'd recommend Thorne. I'd recommend Pure Encapsulation. She listed off several brands that are pharmaceutical grade. And she's like, you can only get them through a doctor, and I just was like, I'm so grateful for doTERRA, because they are so much cheaper than all those brands. And they have great clinical research. They have great batch testing. It's just as good a quality, and for a fraction of the price. So I love that you're getting really bioavailable whole food just clinically backed, researched products here that are really going to make a difference. So the multivitamin is really important. Your vitamin D's, your methylated B's, just a lot of these are going to help prevent losing bone density or muscle when you're fasting, because if you have nutrient deficiencies and you're starting with that and you don't supplement, you might start to run into some issues because your body just doesn't have the building blocks, right? And when your body doesn't have the building blocks, it's going to start breaking things down that we don't want it to break down, and so that's why taking a supplement, you're going to feel better. And I have never had anyone have an issue with feeling nauseous when taking our Microplex VMZ. It is fantastic. It has a tummy taming blend. We're going to help just really make sure the body's fully supported while you're fasting. And I will just take like 2 of those in the morning, 2 in the afternoon. Now, the E omega is really important to take while you're fasting. Dr. Walter Longo, so many people in this space are saying supplement with omegas when you fast. It's just, again, a common deficiency. Let's be proactive. Let's make sure your body is really supported while you're fasting. So ours has wild orange, and that essential oil added to it is a game changer. Most omegas out there are rancid. If you're burping up that fishy taste, it's rancid because fish oil is not very shelf stable. And you also have issues with heavy metals. A lot of, fish that they're using come from waters where there's mercury and heavy metals. And so every batch is tested for heavy metals with ours. A lot of companies don't have that. Again, rancidity, you don't have to worry about that. And you're getting much better absorption because of that wild orange. It's helping those fatty acids go more effectively into the cell. Anyway, and since your body can't make omegas, that's why it's really helpful to supplement with while you're fasting. And then lastly, the PB Restore. Now, you'll hear some people say, don't take probiotics while you're fasting. It's a waste. Well, that's because if you're taking a probiotic that's just a normal probiotic, it probably is a waste because it's not going to survive the stomach acid. But ours is in a time-release dual capsule, and a lot of those good prebiotics, probiotics, postbiotics that are in here all going to get down into your gut, where it's going to do so much good. And because you have the prebiotics in here, it actually is going to be able to survive. It is going to help populate your microbiome more effectively. And it's super comprehensive. Those bacteriophages that are really unique in the PB Restore, you guys, you'd spend $35 easily just to get phages, the bacteriophages. And then you're buying probiotics and prebiotics on top of that. So this is really cost effective, very comprehensive, and it's going to help eliminate a lot of those overgrowths as well. That you just get so much benefit from those bacteriophages. So having the support while you're doing it, and I like to do this in the morning, like I said, and then add my Microplex, another dose in the afternoon. You could take it all at once if you don't remember, and that's fine too. So you can use any electrolyte. The reason I like to use ours is one, the ingredients, right? You're going to have a stevia that is fermented. So it's going to be a lot better than just a regular, sweetener of stevia. You have a really good ratio of potassium to sodium. While you're fasting, you can add some extra, Redmond salt or Himalayan salt or extra salts. But you've got 4 types of magnesium. And this is something that it's very crucial that you supplement with when you're fasting is magnesium. And just because that's going to get depleted very quickly in that first day of the fast. So if you're doing a 36-hour, a 48, or any longer, you're going to want to be doing probably 2 of these a day, morning and afternoon or evening. The 4 types in here are some of the most bioavailable magnesium, so really great researched. You've got liposomal delivery of the vitamin C in here, baobab, so your cells stay hydrated longer, ginseng, naturally going to give you more energy. And again, the sweetener in here is a really good one. So please, 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 take electrolytes when you fast. And I actually, just so I don't have as much sweet taste, will do this in 32 ounces of water instead of 16. And then it's not as sweet, which then I'm not worrying about any insulin just coming from that sweetness as well. So I love it. If you add some lemon essential oil to the wild strawberry, so good. Okay. And then lastly, fiber. If you struggle with feeling really hungry, food addiction, I really recommend that you use fiber when you're fasting. It can really help you feel full, can help with the cravings, and it really helps shift your gut microbiome. So especially if you're doing partial fasting, this is a great addition. Nice and warm in the morning, a little drop of cinnamon oil or cinnamon in there at night before you go to bed. Any of those times, just when you're eating your meal, have some of this fiber with it. It's delicious, and it really makes it easier. If you're one that you're worried about, like, I have a hard time feeling hungry, use the doTERRA fiber. And if you're feeling hungry, this is something that you can go to for that. It's not going to break your fast. This is the other tool you can use if you struggle with cravings, if you struggle with food addiction, if you struggle with hunger. The MetaPower soft gels or the oil are a game changer. There's also some little beadlets that you can use. And just if you're like, oh, I'm craving something, you can pop a little beadlet or do a drop of the oil or take a soft gel. And it really, really amazingly helps reduce those cravings. The cinnamon essential oil in there is incredible. It also helps improve insulin resistance. So this is a really great one to stabilize the blood sugar, help improve that. And then the MetaPower Assist is one that you could also use, if you're doing the partial fasting while you're taking your meals, because you are going to have some whole food carbohydrates. You could take this for a lower blood sugar response and even better outcomes for improving insulin resistance. And then lastly, I promised you we'd talk about some solutions for stress and just helping your body just calm and be not in fight or flight, right? So Copaiba soft gels are like absolutely incredible. The clinical research on this essential oil is absolutely remarkable. But one of the cool benefits, if you're taking this and using this in your journey, is they found that combined with the products that we talked about earlier, those three, or some ones very similar to that without changing anything, changing no diet, no exercise, the Copaiba essential oil taken twice a day in the soft gel, after 90 days, people had almost 3 pounds less of body fat, and they had almost 3 pounds more muscle. So it's improving the metabolism. It's helping the body build muscle, reduce fat, and also good for stress, for calming. The adaptive capsules are absolutely incredible for if you're really struggling with being chronically stressed. Again, you need to get that under control before you start fasting. The partial fasting would be a great option for you. But the adaptive capsules have just been a game changer for so many people that struggle with a lot of stress and anxiety. And then the Shinrin Yoku, there was a great small trial that they did where they diffused the Shinrin Yoku through the night, and they found that morning cortisol levels were significantly lower. So again, if you're in constant state of fight or flight, high cortisol, try diffusing the Shinrin Yoku. It's basically forest oils that just support your central nervous system and can really help calm things down. So there's other tools, mindfulness, yoga, breathing, Tai Chi, like so many things like that, just helping you like calm, focus, can really, really help with just calming that central nervous system, turning off the fight or flight response. So really, really helpful. And now just to finish, lastly, these example fasting plans. So you might be like, where do I start with fasting? This just gives you some ideas of what it can look like. And before I go into this, I am just going to share this slide first. I need to switch these slides. But what I first want you to do is I just want you to stop snacking. If you're new to fasting, if you've never fasted before, and this is all new to you, okay? Again, don't go and jump in the deep end. Like, learn how to swim. And so stop snacking would be the first step, right? Help give your insulin a break, give your cells a break, and stop snacking. Once you've mastered that for a few days, I say really focus on having a good protein breakfast 1 or 2 hours after you wake up every morning, right? Let's just build habits. And so you're going to 25 grams of protein or more. Again, avoid ultra-processed foods. Try to have just all whole food. Keep it lower carbohydrate if you can for that first meal, and get your body set up for a better insulin response throughout the day. Again, the whole goal is to heal your hormones, right? That's what's going to support the body. And I will say one other thing about healing the hormones. Pretty much every major disease in America, cancer, Alzheimer's and dementia, type 2 diabetes, and also heart disease, all the 4 main killers, right? The 4 main things that are disrupting and ruining people's quality of life, all of them have a root in insulin resistance. Insulin resistance is a key contributing factor to every single one of those diseases. One of the major cancer researchers said cancer is a metabolic disease, right? Metabolic dysfunction is at the root of cancer. Of course, it's at the root of type 2 diabetes. They now call dementia type 3 diabetes because of how insulin is a key part of its development. And then, of course, heart disease, we know that high insulin plays a huge role in the development of heart disease. So the reason why we want to do all of this and we want to heal our metabolism, right? Bring down all those high levels of, your cholesterol, your blood pressure, all those things, is because we want to live an abundant, joyful, happy life. And it's so hard to do when you are deeply, deeply sick, right? And we want to be there when our grandkids and our great grandkids. And so I just want to emphasize healing the hormones. It's not about just right now. It's not about a certain weight or anything like that. It's about healing your body to prevent disease. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, right? Your future self will thank you that you made these choices to shift and heal your body right now instead of someday, right? So protein breakfast. And then once you've mastered the protein breakfast and you're like, I've got it, I'm being consistent and I'm doing it, then I want you to start with partial fasting. Again, watch the next class so you can really have some good tools. I shared the resources already in this class, so you can dive into those. The next class will be great. But start with some partial fasting. And I would encourage you to do a 3 to 5 day partial fast. Again, it is not hard, and it's really going to help your body metabolically switch. And then after you've done a couple of partial fasts, and you could do, a 5 day partial fast one week, and the next week you could do a 2 or 3 day one. Again, you're going to give your body plenty of fueling days in between. And then once you've done a couple of those, then you're ready to start regular fasts. And just start with a 24-hour fast. And just again, that journey begins with one step. So here's some examples of shorter fasts versus some longer fasts. So you can see this schedule of 24-hour fasts. That's a good, easy way to start. I will say it can be a little bit harder because you feel hungry on the first day. And so you might choose to do 2 of these. But what it could look like if you're starting with just a couple 24 hours. And again, I would only do 24-hour fasts just the first couple weeks. I would not do them later than that, because we know at 24 hours is right when you might to start experience some healing. Why stop it then? You're not going to get very much benefit if this is what you choose to continue with. Anything that's 24 hours or less, your body, unless you're very metabolically healthy, your body is going to have very little benefit. And so this is kind of like the training wheel fast right here, right? You just might do that for a week where you do an experiment and do a couple 24-hour fasts. And I really encourage you to start with breakfast, right? And then fast the rest of the day. And then the next day, you're going to refuel and eat all day. Okay. And then I'm like, okay, I'm going to try this again. I'm going to get strong. I'm going to build this muscle, right? And then again, this is after you've done a couple of the partial fasts. So your body's ready to metabolically switch. This is after you've done some things to bring your stress levels down and manage that. Then you're starting into your shorter fasts. And then you can see here, you could try again. And I like on the weekends to have 2 eating days, right? Because they're usually more social days, right? And I will say, you cannot outfast an unhealthy eating lifestyle. And the next class, part 2, is we're going to really dive into what does that look like? How can you maximize those fueling, rebuilding days and not have them undo and destroy everything that you did on your fasting day, okay? It's a huge myth. And I actually should have talked about this at the beginning, but at the beginning when people were, there were books and people were talking about fasting, some of the messaging was you can eat whatever you want on your eating days and you're still going to improve. And that might be true for some people, but it is not true for metabolically unhealthy people, which is most of us. And so what you eat on those fueling days is very, very important. So the next class will be about that. The next one, and this is where I recommend if you're new to fasting, you've done your partial fast, after you've done a couple of those 24 hours, the 36-hour is really where you're going to start to see a significant improvement. And this is where you're actually going to reset and heal your metabolism. So this is the minimum once you get started that I would say to do on a longer term basis until your body is healed. And it could look like, this is called alternate day eating, where you eat one day, then you fast the next. And then you eat the next day, and then you fast the entire day, and you don't eat again until you wake up the next morning. That gives your body a full 36 hours. Now, honestly, I feel like this is kind of harder than doing like a 48-hour, because I love maximizing on a day where I don't feel hungry. I love not feeling hungry. And so I prefer to do like 48 or even 72 sometimes. But start with that and see how you feel. But realize that if you start and you start to do some 48-hour fasts, it actually might be easier than doing a 36-hour fast. But what's so important, as you notice here, when you finish that fast, you're going to have at least 1 or 2 days of all refueling with healthy, nourishing food. And that switching back and forth from at least over a 24-hour period and then a full day of eating is what's going to train your metabolism to be able to switch, and it's going to heal the insulin resistance and all those things we talked about. So this, you might in 1 week do one 72-hour fast. You might start with breakfast one day, fast the rest of the day, go until eating breakfast on Thursday, and then you might decide to fast Saturday afternoon and dinner. Maybe you go to brunch with friends or breakfast with friends, and then you eat again all day Sunday. So these are just some different, and again, you want to vary it, right? You don't want to always do the same thing, but those refueling days frequently enough are so, so important so that your metabolism improves. So there's not a best fasting schedule. The best one is it revolves around you, it evolves with you, and it fits your lifestyle and your schedule. So look at your plans, look at your agenda, look at what do I have going on, and plan those eating and those refueling days on days where you have other things going on with people that you're going to eat, right? And just a little tip, if you're like, okay, I've been doing my shorter fast, I've done some 36 hours, I did my partial fast, I'm going to do a 72-hour. What about when your family eats dinner those days, right? You could get some bone broth, put it in a bowl, get a spoon, and eat with them, right? You're going to keep in the fasted state, or maybe you do a partial fast, right? Again, you're going to burn more fat, and especially around the waist when you're doing more of like a water fast with the broth than a partial fast. But the partial fast is going to heal a ton of things. But just a little tip there. So, okay. And then we talked about this. So take a screenshot. This is kind of your action plan. What do I do? And then lastly, here's some next step. Okay. We have a great fasting support Telegram group. That's where you can ask questions. I'm in there. We have another fasting coach certified expert with Felicia who's in there. And I will be sharing some resources. It's just a place where you can, after today, you can get answers from someone who has some experience. So feel free to use that group. There's a QR code. And then if you really struggle with the healthy eating, okay, I highly, highly recommend joining the Revive in 45 Metabolism Reset. Natalie is the coach for that. She's incredible. She's had an amazing healing journey, and she really helps you to learn the mindset of how to shift how you think about food. She helps you learn practical life skills to shift your diet and your habits and your patterns. And you incorporate some of the MetaPower products that we talked about as well. So I highly recommend that group. If you're like, I have such bad patterns and habits, like no shame, recognize where you are, but this is a great next step. We've had so many people on our team have amazing results in healing doing this program. So thank you so much for joining us. We are so, so grateful that you were able to be here with us today. And just so excited for your healing journey, for you to be able to just continue to feel your best, to get at the root and help our bodies. God created them in such an amazing way that they can heal themselves when we give them the right tools and we support them with the right things. So thank you so much for joining us.